Welcome to the Hard Won Wisdom Podcast with best-selling author Fawn Germer and corporate innovator Michelle Brigman. Come here weekly for career and life-changing conversations with some of today's most influential thought leaders, senior executives, and trailblazers who will share their mentoring wisdom. This podcast is brought to you by the Women's Leadership Network.
Hi, I'm Fawn Germer.
And I'm Michelle Brigman.
And this is the Hard Won Wisdom Podcast. Today we are with a spiritual medium who has gotten so much international attention because she finds some things coming from the other side that most of us don't expect to hear. And she's gotten so much attention from every kind of big name, Oprah and everybody else, and then went on to become a best-selling author. And we're really lucky to have Rosen with us today to tell us about how she developed her talents, how she's teaching her kids to do it, how you can do it, and really a little about the industry itself. So, Rebecca, welcome.
Thank you. This is fun to be here.
Well, it's a thrill for us. And just if we can get started with telling us the story. How did you realize you had this gift, and did it scare the hell out of you?
Sure. Yes, it did. I grew up for the first 20 years of my life having no idea that this existed. I was raised in a family. We didn't talk about psychics or paranormal stuff. And so, it really began when I was in college and I was going through a dark night of the soul. What was happening was my father had attempted suicide at the time, and my parents were trying to protect me by not sharing too much and wanted me to be off my, happy little college life, which I was. But I'm very intuitive and empathic, and I was feeling, something wasn't right. And the way I dealt with my emotions was I would stuff them. I would stuff them with food. And so I wasn't doing it consciously during the day. I was sleepwalking. It's called sleep eating. It was a nightmare. And it went on for months and months and months. And so needless to say, I felt out of control and desperate for help. And I did the traditional route of therapy and got on antidepressants, which only made it worse because I wasn't chemically imbalanced. I was going through a situation. So I turned to a more holistic approach of journaling and exercise and yoga. And so what happened was one day I was sitting in a bookstore and I was just really upset about something. While I should have been studying for my marketing exam, I'm sitting there journaling and anyways, I started to hear an energy in my head, and it came through so fast. It started to take over my hand. And for an hour, it dragged my hand across the page. It's called automatic writing. But at the time, I didn't know what it was. And so I heard the thoughts in my head faster than I could get them down. It was my grandma Babe, who had died 10 years before that from suicide. And it was my guardian angel. And again, I think I'm making this up because I didn't know if I believed in angels. And so long story short, in that hour, it was transformative because she said, I'm here because you're crying yourself to sleep every night. You're asking for help. I'm here to help you not to go down the same dark road of depression that I went down. And your angel's here, to help you build your own connection to your own intuition and trust. You have all the answers you need inside of you. And we know you think you're making this up. So call your father and ask him these 3 things from his mother. Well, I ran out of the bookstore. I called my dad. 3 of those things were things nobody knew except him. One of them being when she killed herself, he found her. And he never told anybody about certain details. And she told me them. So he said, I know you're talking to her. And if it feels loving and kind, keep doing it. And so for 18 months, every day, I met my angel and my grandmother in my journaling, but also in meditation. And that's how it started. And so she really did. She gave me a prescriptive program, which became the basis of my first book, Spirited. It's, how to heal yourself on a mind, body, spirit level. And really to educate us on the fact that we're not alone. We have a team in spirit here to help guide us forward. And that's exactly what they did for me.
So would you be able to ask her questions and get answers?
Yes. And yes. And so one of the things was I was desperate for a relationship. And so I begged her, to give me insight on that. And she said, you're going to meet a guy. His name is Ryan. And then over time, she'd give me more clues. It's like breadcrumbs. She said, he'll give you a rose. You'll know it's him. It's a rose. And something about 9/24 is his birthday. This is like 1999, pre-Google, right? Well, fast forward, after 18 months of doing the work, I was happy and healthy again. I met a guy named Brian Rosen. So take the B off Brian, you get Ryan, and not Rosen, you get Rose. So I went through those journals and I called him and I said, is your birthday September 24th? And it was. Pretty amazing, right? So that I needed that because I doubted it for so long that it was enough evidence to build my faith and trust and to keep working with them. And so at that point, really what happened was I graduated with my degree in advertising. I tried to get a job in it. I couldn't. So my grandma kept saying, use this. It's a gift. Share it with others to help empower them and heal them. And so I said, all right, God, if you want me to do this, I will, but you bring it to me. I'm not going to go hunt people down. And sure enough, that's what happened. 3 months into doing it out of a coffee shop in Detroit, Michigan, a woman came to me and said, I write for the Detroit Jewish News. I'd love to do an article. Well, the article turned into be the cover of the magazine and it went out to over 100,000 people. And that was 20 years ago. So that's really what launched my business.
Oh my word.
Right.
I'm like, I have to just pause for a second. It's interesting because there were a couple of things that you shared that kind of stuck with me. One was the story of the passing through suicide. And, depending on how you're raised, it's a hopeless, dark situation, leaving the family behind with concern that, is their loved one in a happy place? And so I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you've learned through this gift in terms of death caused by suicide versus something else.
Well, unfortunately, I'm an expert in suicide. My father died by suicide. He attempted what I shared with you, and then 11 years later, he actually did it again and succeeded. So my father, my grandmother, and I channel so many souls who have died by suicide. And here's what I've come to understand. It's very easy for the human mind to judge it, good or bad, right or wrong. Okay. But that's just very limited. And what it is, we need to see it through a soul perspective. And what Spirit has shown me is that some souls come in, we all come in with a soul plan. Okay. Lessons we need to learn in this lifetime and teach others. And some souls come in with the probability of suicide for whatever reason. Sometimes it's that they sign up for more than they can handle. Okay. And they realize halfway in that like, whoa, I can't accomplish what I set out to do. So I'm going to check out and go heal in spirit and then come back and try it again. Sometimes, it's free will. We all have free choice. Sometimes there really are lessons in them. Dying by suicide obviously is traumatic for the living. And so it forces profound lessons and hopefully healing and deepening of faith from the experience. So if a soul is meant to live, meaning they attempt suicide and they fail, they weren't supposed to go. Divine intervention occurs, whatever that means. They will not succeed. But if they succeed, we have to trust that they were meant to go. And we have to honor that was their path and their choice. I say that because I work with so many survivors of loved ones who have died from suicide, and it's devastating, but there's so much guilt that the living carries. And so when my dad died, for a couple of years, I was crippled with guilt, because I was the last person to see him 3 weeks before of my siblings. And he said to me, I've come so far, I would never take my life like I attempted 11 years ago. He lied to my face, but my dad was not mentally well. And so I felt personally responsible, like I should have prevented it. I'm a psychic. I was years into my work. I should know this. But it took a lot of healing, a lot of healers that I worked with to help me come to terms with it was his path. If I was meant to prevent it, I would have. And the first time it was prevented. He wasn't supposed to go. The second time it was okay. And so the last thing I'll say about this, the soul who dies by suicide is always okay. They're forgiven. They forgive themselves. They're not punished. In fact, the opposite, they're nurtured and embraced by their team in spirit to heal them. And so they just have to pick up where they leave off. That's the thing. Nothing goes away. We have to be accountable and deal with it at some point.
So you have to go through that. So much of what you say is contrary to what religion teaches us. And so I kind of want to know about that, about what is the reality? Is it a judging God? Is there an afterlife? What is it, and what's it look like?
Yeah, wow, those are big questions. So, is there a God? Yes. My understanding of God, God is an energy, it's love. God is love. Okay. So it's this place of oneness. God is all inclusive. Okay. Unfortunately, it feels to me like religion holds the potential to separate people, segregate. It's again a world of duality, right, wrong, good, bad. This is the way. In my experience, what I've heard for 20 years from spirits is that at the end of the day, we all come back to the same place. Many paths, one truth. And that one truth is source, God, divine creator, whatever you want to call it. And we all have that God spark inside of us. That's our soul. That's what connects us all. We're all individuals. We have egos. We have separate bodies and personalities. But in the end, we're all connected because we are all souls. And so is there a God? Yes. But God is an energy. It's not a man sitting on a cloud, playing judge and jury. And so the other thing is that when we cross over, so we're in 3D consciousness. We're in an earth world. This is a world of separation consciousness. Okay. That's the ego. The spirit world is 5D consciousness, which is unity consciousness. And so there's no duality. So this world is hard. And there are a lot of those, again, judgments and like your way is the way or my way is the way. And that's unfortunately what we're up against. But any awakened person, any person who's more operating like we're spiritual beings having a human experience, not the other way around. So anyone who's aware of that remembers that there's no judgment. You may choose Catholicism to find your connection to something bigger, and that's beautiful and perfect. I choose maybe spirituality. Somebody else, I'm raised Jewish. I honor my upbringing. I still draw off of Judaism. So what we need to remember is that, yeah, there are people in this world, especially religious leaders, who are going to preach their way is the way. But again, many paths, one truth. And that one truth brings us back to that connection to God, which is love.
Well, and think about how freeing that is to just understand and really absorb that you're not ruled by all of these, okay, is this right or wrong? Or am I living within these certain parameters? And it's just rooting back out to love. So how do you, or even what advice would you even give if you're trying to really differentiate what is ego or fear or all of these things, sending these messages versus spirit and what's true?
Yeah, no, it's great. So, our ego is there to keep us alive. It's a positive thing when we keep it in check. And spirit always says the most powerful people are those who combine intellect and intuition. Okay, so you use your ego to help you operate as a human and make good choices, right? But you trust your intuition and your connection to your higher self. So the difference between ego and higher self really comes down to the higher self is not, again, a place of duality where it's judging things, labeling things. Instead, it's a place of love and truth and kindness and compassion, and right where the ego, it's separated. So it feels threatened. It feels greedy at times, very judging, so there is a difference. And so what you need to remember is your higher self. I always say, when it comes to knowing what real guidance is, listen to your feelings, get into your heart, get out of your head. The head is what, our mind is what jumps to the judgment. Okay. Our hearts feel. and our feelings don't lie. Okay. Our feelings are our guidance. And so if you're trying to figure out the higher self decision in any moment, get out of your head, get into your heart. And the fastest way to do it is start breathing, pull yourself into this now moment, because the mind loves to run wild about the future, the past. But when you're present, you're in your point of power. And that's where you can access your inner knowing, that intuition I was speaking of.
So, what are 2 or 3 of the more astonishing moments that you've had accessing that intuition as a spirit medium?
You mean like working with people? Or,
Yeah. Like when you've
2 or
done
3.
readings.
Oh, yeah. So, what I would say is there's always, every death is significant, but when I work with parents who have lost children, to me, that is the most devastating and hardest to comprehend. Like, why would I sign up for a life contract where I'm losing this child? However, the child dies. The first thing that comes to mind is a husband and a wife who came to see me, and they had an autistic son, and he died at the age of 23 or 24. And they came to a small group reading I had in Chicago. And immediately I said, there's a young boy here, and he's showing me a pair of tennis shoes. And that it's something about like he was buried with his shoes, or he had them like on when he died. And this father just burst out crying, sobbing. And I don't know that he believed. The wife dragged him into it. And he was speechless. He said, our son died a few months ago. And the week before he died, he begged us for these Nikes. And we bought them for him, and he wore them every day. And we buried him with those Nikes. Mm. And nobody knew that. Right. And so you could see the transformation come over him. So once his son came, got his attention and built his trust, this is real, Dad. He said to him, look, my sole contract was to come in and have these challenges because he was a more advanced soul, call it an earth angel. And he was here to help his parents, his dad especially, learn compassion and patience in how to, handle what obviously was a very challenging situation. But also his death was equally meant to deepen his father's faith, because I always say when you go through tragedy, it takes you one of 2 ways, either further away from God in faith or closer to it. And there was a shift. So I use that as an example because that's why I do this work, right? To help people understand, this is real. So give enough evidence. It's like what I needed. I needed the Ryan Rose 924 to build my faith and trust. But then you get past that, and then you want to understand why. We're living in really challenging times, and it's very empowering when you realize it's not happening to you, it's happening for you, for your own soul evolution. So you're not a victim. It takes you out of victim consciousness and it empowers you. And okay, so I am an active co-creator with the divine. And knowing that, you then can make your choices based in that place of empowerment. Does that make sense?
Well, it sounds like what you're saying, though, is that we sign up for this life, and that if you take a shortcut out, it doesn't mean you get to avoid anything. Why would anybody sign up for something that is miserable?
Okay, so think of it like we're in school, and some kids drop out of school before they graduate. They may get their GED, they may not get anything. That's ultimately what I was saying with suicide. They're dropping out. Okay. They may say, I need a break and then I'll go back to school. So we're in earth school. Okay. Why would we sign up for that? The soul knows it's temporary. Time's an illusion. We know we're going to come in. Some souls, myself included, are pretty ambitious and they take on a lot. And they do it with the knowing they have free will. So if they go with the flow, the lessons they signed up for, challenging or not, will likely unfold. But at any point, you can change that. I always say the future is not set in stone because, again, you may have signed up to go through challenging times, but once you get there, you may say, time out, I'm not doing this. So whether I'm not doing this means I'm dropping out of school, going home, or I need to renegotiate this contract because this is way more. I was way over ambitious. And so then you can shift that, and you can do it in a lot of different ways. I won't go into that, but you can do energy healing and regression work, past life or in life between lives regression, to meet with your guides and renegotiate your soul contract. So that's a whole other topic. But the point is, your soul knows it's temporary, and the growth that will come from it is far greater than any temporary discomfort or pain you might experience. Okay. But honestly, if you're comfortable, you're not growing. We're in Earth school. We have homework. We're in class. It's not meant to be all fun and games. You know, when we graduate, we go home, we go to heaven. Call it summer vacation. That's where you get to kick your feet up and sit back and restore your energy and be in a place of non-duality, a place of love and peace and joy. But then to challenge your soul to grow, a lot of souls, not all, we reincarnate. Okay. And so you have a choice. You're not forced to, but you know that the things left undone or unhealed, it's easier to correct it and to karmically balance it if you come back to the condition or the place where you created it. So again, anyone, like, for example, who died by suicide would want to reincarnate at some point, because whatever they left undone or wherever they feel they could have done better, they can more quickly balance that out if they're in a human experience. Now, you can do it from the other side. My grandma Babe, who died by suicide, said, I'm tired, I'm not coming back, but I'm going to help you from the other side. So in turn, I'm going to be your spirit guide. So she took a break. She's working from the other side to balance her karma versus incarnating. Doesn't mean she won't in the near future. I know it's a lot. It's overwhelming.
It's fascinating. We're going to pause real quick for a break, and then we're going to come back.
Hey, Fawn.
Hey, Michelle.
Okay, we have all these amazing women that are sharing their stories on this podcast, but what do we do now so it is not a bunch of talk and no action?
Well, that's the easy part. Everybody just head over to the Women's Leadership Network at womensleadershipnetwork.com. And wowza, this is the ultimate mastermind and masterclass for career women. So if you're looking for coaching and inspiration from some of the most accomplished and influential women of our times, and you don't want to pay $1 million for it, you've found your tribe.
All right, so what do we get?
Coaching, courses, community, and connection.
What's that website again, Fawn?
Well, that's the easy part. womensleadershipnetwork.com.
Okay. Thank you, Rebecca. We are enjoying the conversation today, and just completely fascinating. It's something that I find interesting is so many of the people I talk to, if you open the dialogue around spirit and reincarnation and psychic, and suddenly you find that people are very curious or actually have a belief. And when I was growing up, it was like woo-woo, nobody talked about it. You were judged. It was like absolutely unacceptable. What do you think is changing that is getting more and more people to be open and, in fact, believers that this is real?
Yeah. Well, I'm so grateful that is what's happening, because 20 years ago, I always say it was like coming out of the closet, saying I talk to dead people, and people would roll their eyes and I would have to prove it. And it was exhausting. The veil between heaven and earth is thinning, literally. So we are in a very interesting time. Again, we're moving from 3D consciousness, operating merely from 3D, which is very limited, to 4 and 5D consciousness. And what's happening is again, the veil's lifting from people individually, where it's thinner. They're starting to literally have more miracles and magical experiences, seeing or hearing from dead loved ones, getting crazy signs and synchronicities. And so they're getting curious, and they're wanting to explore it. Nowadays, I mean, there's mediums are like therapists, intuitives, healers, whatever you want to call them. We all do our different areas of expertise, but there are so many intuitive healers out there. And so I think it's just more acceptable because more of us are doing it in a way that's making it more valid. There's enough of us doing it to show the evidence that it's undeniable. And so I think I also think, there's been a lot of exposure with television shows and podcasts and radio shows where we're demonstrating it. So again, it's a fascinating topic because at the end of the day, we're all going to go back to this place. And my hope is you don't have to wait until you die to bring heaven to earth. You can experience that 5D consciousness, learning through grace and ease and joy and not pain and struggle. Okay. And so that's what's happening.
Now, you're well aware that there are many, many skeptics out there who say that mediums, naming many, including you, have a specific formula for getting people to kind of volunteer the details and fill in the blanks. So I wonder, what do you say about that? And then also, how do you tell people to protect themselves that they can find someone who is legitimate so that they don't mortgage their house or spend money they don't have trying to get answers that are legitimate?
Sure. So just to start, as with any profession, there's going to be those who work out of integrity. Okay. And all we as mediums can do is just show up with pure intention. And the pure intention is to use the gift for good, to use it for healing and comfort and clarity and guidance for people. Okay. And so for me personally, I'm not speaking for all mediums, but I feel it's very important to build faith and trust in the beginning. So 2 examples that just happened in the last few weeks. One, I get on the phone with a woman, total skeptic. I'm thinking, why did she call? Because she was so shut down and I can only give you what you're ready to receive. And if you put a wall up, it's not going to be a very good reading. I always say be skeptical, but don't be cynical. And if you are skeptical, you are discerning. Discernment is important, right? So right away, her dad came through and I said, all right, you are really shutting down on me. And I'm going to say one thing and I hope this turns it around. Why am I supposed to say cashews? Oh, that was it. She's like, are you kidding me? This morning, I was in my pantry and I'm looking at my almonds and my cashews and the cashews are empty. And I said, all right, Dad, I'm doing this day. If this is real, mention I have to go get more nuts, cashews today. How direct is that? Another woman, her husband was giving her a very hard time for signing up for a reading. And I said, oh, his dad and her mom came through. And I said, don't worry about it. I said, hopefully your belief and your faith will rub off on him at some point, but it's not your job to convince him. And then I said, okay, his dad is saying, mention bananas. She said, oh my God, Rebecca, he said, I'll believe it's real if she says bananas. That happens every day, 10 times a day.
You remember the first time we talked and my partner had stayed home from work so she could eavesdrop. So even if you did want to check other resources for information, you never would have known who to look up or what. And, first thing you was like, who's Anne? And it was her grandmother, Anna. Well, that one we could say anybody could do. But then you said, now, who is Duke? And it's not like you can pull a name like Duke out of thin air.
Well, that's just it. They give you things, they'll recite conversations you had moments before. They'll give you things that you can't research. Again, here you ask the question, how do people find credible mediums to work with? First of all, word of mouth is huge. My whole business has been based off word of mouth. Okay. Referrals. Because if your best friend went to somebody and said, I promise you, it was life-changing and it was nothing she could have known, you're going to trust that person versus looking in the yellow pages, right? And so word of mouth is huge. And then finding someone who will give you the specifics that I just mentioned, not just factual information, right? But finally, it's really about, I always say, pray and ask spirit. Say, okay, Mom, you died and we need to connect. Show me who to use as that medium. Bring me that name or show me where to go. And it may be direct. Spirit may come to you because I always say nobody has a closer connection to your own intuition and departed loved ones than you do. So spirit may say, forget the medium, go develop your own ability, meet me in your dreams or meditation. And so you just have to trust. If you have the intention to make an authentic connection, you'll either find the right practitioner to help you or you will be able to connect at some point on your own.
So spirits and guides, are they the same thing? Are they family? Tell me
That's
a little
great
bit.
question.
Yeah.
I just did a whole workshop called with John Holland. He's another wonderful medium, and it was called Team Spirit. Okay. And that is available if people want to really do the deep dive on this. But I call it, my term for it is Team Spirit. Okay. And what it is, it's a combination of the best therapists and counselors and friends, and like, just like we have support in this world from living people, right? We have a support system in the spirit world. So it's made up of departed loved ones, pets, angels, spirit guides, ascended masters, saints. Okay. And for everyone, it's different. But your dead relatives are sometimes your spirit guides, usually not, because they have to be responsibly trained to guide you. They can't just show up one day and say, I'm going to start working with you. Okay. Your guardian angels won't allow it. So your dead people are always your cheerleaders. So when I do readings, I'm connecting on a lot of different levels. I meet the person where they are at. If I'm working with someone who's really well educated in all this and meditates every day, we're going to go high. We're going to do dead people, angels, saints, all of it. For some people, it is 101. It is, and that's fine. There's no good or bad. It just is. We just stand dead people and pets, and that's enough for them. And so sometimes these loved ones come forward as spirit guides. So my grandma Babe, there's no way she could have guided me right away because she was so wounded. She needed years of healing. It took 10 years before she even made contact with anybody. But she did the work and she became my spirit guide with all that empathy and compassion for the human experience. She said, I get what you're going through. You're going through depression. Let me help you, because it became a win-win. Her success in guiding me to health and healing and happiness became her evolution, healing and balancing her karma. So yes, your spirit guides, we all have them. We all have a guardian angel, and their purpose is I always compare it to a school system. So the guardian angel is like the principal of the school, right? You don't have day-to-day contact, but they're there to make sure everything's running smoothly, you're safe, protected, out of harm's way. Your spirit guides are like your teachers, and you have different subjects you're learning. So you have different lessons you're learning. So you have different guides according to those lessons.
So they can change over time or vary based on.
They'll come and go.
What exactly is the after? Well, you're saying that there isn't so much an afterlife, but after you die, what are you going to be doing? Right. Where are you going to be? What's it going to look like? Are you going to eat? Do you see your loved ones and your dogs? What's coming?
Okay, so all the readings I did today, I did some private readings before this, and they all addressed that. I had a man come through. This woman's father died early February, a few weeks ago. And I said to her, it looks like France. And she said, that's where he was born, but he was, he always felt that was home, but he was moved as a child. And I said, he's back in France and he's eating great French food. And she said, oh my God, he couldn't eat at the end. All he wanted was all these French dishes that his mother used to make. Well, he came through with his mother talking about back in his heaven. That's what was joy to him. Some spirits come through and say, hey, I'm on a golf course. Others say, hey, I'm in a ongoing lecture, like an auditorium, like sitting and learning from a professor. Every spirit has a different idea of what joy is and what peace and comfort is. And so they're in the heaven that they earned. Okay. And so, yes, there's a heaven, but there are different levels and layers to heaven. So there are lower levels that could be likened to a hell. And you pick up where you left off and you go to the place that you've earned based on the choices you made and the kind of person you were. So, and I want to say this. People get nervous when I say that because we all make mistakes. You're not meant nor expected to be perfect. It's Earth School. We're here to learn lessons. We're here to make mistakes. It's what you do with that matters. Did you learn from it? Did you grow from it? Did you try and do and be better the next time that lesson circled around, right? That's all that matters. So then you have nothing to worry about. You will graduate and go to this beautiful place where you meet up with, right when you cross over, there's a waiting room between heaven and earth, and it's called the astral plane, okay? That's the fourth dimension. So the astral plane is where I go when I talk to dead people. Sounds crazy, but what happens is the medium raises their vibe really high, the spirits lower theirs, and you meet in the middle, and that's where you meet. And what happened, that's where communication takes place. That's where we go when we dream at night. Okay. So we've all had those experiences where we've had dreams and you wake up and you're very disoriented. You're like, what day is it? Where am I? You were just astral traveling. And a lot of people say they saw their departed loved ones, their pets in spirit in their dream state. Well, guess what? You were just with them there. So that's that thing that when we die, we're all going to leave this physical body, that soul, that light is going to cross over and go back to these higher realms that we're talking about.
When you do that, though, are you going to see everybody?
Yes. So what happens is typically you're greeted, when you cross over, you're greeted by a guide or an angel. It could be a departed loved one because you want to see a familiar face of your grandmother or your mother. So you're greeted and then you go, it depends on how you died. If you died tragically and you had a lot of trauma or you need a lot of healing, you go to a place that looks like a hospital. It's like an ICU where your energy is restored. So when my dad died by suicide, he was inaccessible for months. It took 10 months for me to get contact with him. He was restoring his light. He was in a place of self-inquiry and reflection. And then he started coming to me very vividly in my dreams. Okay. So what happens is that either that, or for those who die a natural death, old age, or they're just more evolved and they don't need a lot of bounce back. They bounce back right away, not a lot of healing. They'll be greeted. It's like having a homecoming, like a family reunion. Okay. I did a reading today where this woman's mother was coming through and she named seriously 15 spirits. I was like, can we get on with this? We just kept naming dead relatives. But she said her mother was the glue of the family. She was the matriarch. She was one of 6 kids. She had all these siblings and relatives that they were so excited to greet her. And the woman said, I wanted to know who my mom was with because that was so important to her. I wanted to know she wasn't alone. So they will come forward and tell you all of that. If they know, it'll bring you peace of mind.
So by sharing with us that, this isn't a future of suffering and dark and that you can never come out of. I mean, you give hope, right? That when you cross over, you give hope. What should we be doing differently in terms of how we live our lives today?
I love that. So that's really what it comes down to, because time is an illusion. And what I was saying earlier is my guides keep saying, you do not have to wait until you die to find heaven on earth. Spirit wants us to bring more of that joy and love and compassion and peace, inner peace to this realm and have it now. So what you can do is just start to become mindful of the fact we are more than our bodies. We are more than our minds. Okay. We are light. And that's what I work with. Light is the soul. And that's what transforms or transcends death. Okay. So start working with that light. Try and be the brightest light you can be. So what that means is do things from your heart, show up and do random acts of kindness, be compassionate, be non-judgmental, be accepting, start to set that intention to not be in that place of lower self ego, but in that place of higher self, which is seeing all of us as one. So if you start doing that, and the other big thing is meditation. Now, I hesitate using that word because it freaks out some people because they think they have to be skilled or, there's a right or wrong way to do it. There's not. Meditation is really getting present and being still. It's calming down the monkey mind. So we all have the mind chatter. And I'll be honest, I go into readings some days with all my children and my busy life. My mind is still going and I'm reading. I'll be reading somebody and talking to Helen and seeing lemon meringue pie. And that was Helen's famous recipe. And at the same time, I'm thinking about my kid who might be sick. Oh God, should I get a COVID test? It's happening simultaneously. But I've learned to understand when it's my mind, the ego, versus when it's divine. Okay. So if you start to meditate, you start to recognize the difference. And really, it goes back to divine is loving and peaceful and simple truth. The mind tells stories. So the way I like to compare that is a mind thought versus a divine thought. A mind thought is a trailed thought. You think one thing, you think this, and it leads you to that conclusion. A divine thought comes out of the blue. You're like, I was driving to work and all of a sudden I got a pit in my stomach, worried about my mother. And then you find out your mother just fell down the stairs. That's divine. versus you're thinking this, and then you think about your mother and, oh gosh, I wonder if everything's okay. And you call and everything's fine. So it's learning. So meditation helps us be the observer, okay? And not get attached to all the mind thoughts. And then when you do that, you open up space to connect to your own intuition and receive messages on your own from your team and spirit.
Pretty mind-blowing.
Wow. This is just so, like I said before, it just makes me feel very hopeful. I mean, Rebecca, I think that, normally I kind of do a little bit of a wrap in terms of lessons, but I think just the gift you just gave in terms of how we can do more to live in our present today and feel full of love and trust and confident that, everything's not based in judgment. We have this great, like you said, team spirit on our side that's surrounding us. Our job is just to begin to tune in and listen. I just thank you for sharing your gifts with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you for being open and sharing it with your audience.
Well, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you for joining the Hard-Won Wisdom podcast with best-selling author Fawn Germer and corporate innovator Michelle Brigman. Join us weekly for career and life-changing conversations with some of today's most influential thought leaders, senior executives, and trailblazers who will share their mentoring wisdom. This podcast is brought to you by the Women's Leadership Network. Visit hardwonwisdom.com for more on this podcast and for links to Fawn and Michelle's web pages and social media. Also, be sure to rate, subscribe, and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. We really appreciate that effort, and we'll see you next week.